Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Career Focus. Today you're going to hear me chat with Danny Cohen. Danny is a staffing specialist for an international staffing agency. Danny is a really high-spirited, positive, powerful voice in the DEI space. He talks a little bit about his challenging upbringing, being raised by a single mother in England, and how that shaped him to increase perspective and just naturally be an ally in that space for so many underserved minorities and groups. He also talks about ways that folks can be a great ally. And because he's a staffing specialist, he's also an expert on a lot of things that I've talked about with other guests in previous episodes. We talk about how to build your confidence, how to create the right elevator pitch for you. We talk about networking, how to align your values with the right company. So if you're looking to be a DEI ally and you want to be a high performer, there's a number of different topics that we cover that are going to pertain to you. So glad you're here. Put those headphones in and take a listen. Danny, you are clearly a super busy guy. So grateful that you're here to be on the show. Welcome to Career Focus.
Thank you, Dan. It's a pleasure to be here, sir.
I would love to dive in and hear just a little bit about your life/career background leading up to today.
Yeah, I'll try to give it into a short summary. So I'm born and raised in Northwest London, even though I live in sunny Austin, Texas right now. I grew up and at around 4 years old, my mum and dad split up and I haven't seen my dad since. My mum was a manicurist in London. So you can imagine single parent raising two kids in quite a tough financial climate, so to speak. And she did everything she could. I watched a queen work so hard to keep my brother and I happy, but I saw a lot of depression, financial issues. At about 11 years old, I went to boarding school where it was free. So it would take the pressure off my mom and I could get an education. About 16 years old, the school closed down. And in about 2 years, I feel like most 16-year-olds do, have no discipline and motivation. But then the wake-up call at 18 years old. And I always say it's not what you know, it's who you know, and your network is your net worth. I had a very lucky and valuable connection who talked to me about staffing. And there's the natural assumptions that staffing is HR. Yes, it is humans and you're dealing with placing resources into roles, but it's very sales. You've got to convince customers and candidates to work with you and trust you on the long term, which I felt was really something I would like to do. And it's working with people. And then at 18, I got a lucky opportunity and worked at a company where I actually stayed for about 20 years. I started in London, was probably one of the worst recruiters in history, couldn't place a single candidate for 6 months. In my second year, I became one of the top consultants, but also won a trophy called Most Improved, which kind of says a lot about where I was to where I came. And then about 23, I got very fortunate. I got asked by the business to move out to Amsterdam, eventually leading and developing our specialist staffing groups across Europe, and then got the call to come to America, which I couldn't turn down. It was always my dream to come out to the US. I thought I was born for this beautiful country and lifestyle. And so about 8-9 years ago, I moved to initially Houston, and then to Austin. When I first came out to America, it was quite evident that there was a real issue around ED&I or DEI. It was really predominantly focused on the technology industry. I noticed very quickly how bad from a gender equality it was for women. And given my background, which my mum struggled for many years, I really wanted to drive education awareness and support for women in tech. So we created a company at that time called Breaking the Glass, which has gone on to great heights. And then about 2 years ago, when I left that group, I joined the Impeller Group. And I think a major reason why I joined was Claire Marsh, the CEO, one of the few company CEOs that's female-led. She really truly believed and supported DEI, which has allowed me to set up a company, STEM Council for Good, within the group, which truly creates pathways for everyone from underserved, underrepresented communities to get jobs. So I've been there for 2 years, absolutely love it. And my purpose really aligns to the company's purpose. And so, yeah, I feel very fortunate that I'm here today. So that's just a little bit about my journey of where I started to where I am right now.
I love that. I like how you told a little bit about your personal background, especially as a child and as a teenager and growing up in a single parent household. You obviously had to handle a lot of adversity at a really young age, which I can imagine probably helped shape you into not just the professional, but the human being that you are today. So it sounds like such a great story.
That's very kind of you. It's funny, I was talking last week to a board of directors at Krispy Kreme's, funny enough. And she was giving me her story. And then it was the same morning where I was talking to one of my leaders who's doing really well. And I said, the trend is very simple. And it doesn't mean I wish this upon anyone who starts in their life, but tough upbringings, sometimes you're just used to it feeling tough. So you just are quite resilient and quite aware of how you have to adapt. I use a quote a lot from Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest or most intelligent that survive. It's those who can adapt, because I've got to be honest, I never would have if it was the strongest, most intelligent. I recognize resilience has come from the environment I was created in, and I'm a product of that environment. I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. And my son has the most amazing life, and I'm a bit worried how lazy it's made him. But I recognize it's got great things. Obviously, there's got those insecurities and that chip on your shoulder and that sort of, hey, it's tough out there type mentality. But I think I'm more realistic to the reality of what life can sometimes bring, good and bad.
When we think about diversity and inclusion, I think a lot of folks that feel like they are part of that community had adversity at an early age and might even still be struggling through adversity. Can you talk about why DEI is such an important element into successful companies? And if you're someone starting out your career, whether you belong to one of those communities or not, why DEI is such an important element into researching the right place to work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the importance of when you work for an organization is you want to see people like you around the room. You want to feel safe that you can be you. And if there aren't examples of you in that organization, well, why isn't there? Have they failed? Do they get the right support? Are there biases? And you make natural conclusions, assumptions, the whole assuming you make an ass of you and me. Well, sometimes you do assume the worst because sometimes the perception is reality. It's crucial that organizations understand that from a perception point of view, employees are always looking at where can I thrive, not just survive. And so it's absolutely crucial that organizations don't just use it as a checkbox, that they try to drive DEI, because it's great to have a diverse group of people that's inclusive. But I think even more when I work with people in the accessibility space, which is the largest minority in the world, they have to feel like they don't just have a seat at the table and have a voice. Because driving DEI is now become a bit like, oh, it's a buzzword and we're all going to support it. But you need to feel that you actually have an equal voice, equal pay, equal rights. So it's crucial for organizations, both from a new hire, but also retention point of view. I think in terms of the progression the world needs to look at is there is talent everywhere. However, are you creating pathways for that talent? Are you giving them the time to upskill them, to train them, to bring them through? And it's evidence that the best companies with diversity at the heart of it are better organizations to work for. You have more diversity of thought. And honestly, when I look at a lot of my business units that struggle, is when the leadership is all the same. But when the leadership is different and the leadership drive the same message, the right values, one, companies really move forward and proceed to be the best at what they can be. But you also really understand the world because it's inside, not just external. So that's just from my experience, but it does take time. And I think a lot of organizations are just looking for that quick hire versus actually really building out programs and support systems and a community, both internally and externally. And what's really helped us, Dan, at Pelham Group, and I'm not trying to PR Pelham, but what I've really loved to see is it's really led from the top, but it's also bottom up. So you see a lot of our BRGs, ERGs for many organizations, employee resource groups, where they focus on all these DEI, because white males like us, we don't sometimes understand from other point of view. So just by shutting our mouths and listening can be a powerful thing. And in sales, we talk about it. You have two ears and one mouth. Even though I talk a lot, I should be listening more than I talk, especially when I'm in those rooms. I was on a session last week with women on boards. There was like an 85% uptake for allyship from a talk perspective, but about 5 to 10% from a walk the walk perspective. Yes, everyone wants to be involved, but are they really spending the time to do it? As allies, we have to put the time in. Time is our greatest commodity, and that for me is the most valuable way to give back.
That's a great point that you're making, that especially you having such a strong background in STEM related functions. I work for a tech company, as you mentioned. You and I are both white males. In your opinion, what are good ways for allies of all sorts to devote that time effectively and truly be an effective ally?
Yeah. So I was on a mentorship panel last week. One of the mentors, he said, first, you've got to make sure your cup's full with energy and love before you give your cup out, so to speak, you give your energy to others. But what I see is people go, oh, I don't have the time. I'm like, well, let's do a time and motion exercise. Let's break down what your 40 hours looks like. And then what could it look like? And when you break it down, they've got time. They're just not dedicated to focusing on making a difference. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, are they identifying where they have a passion and a purpose? Veterans, military spouses, the LGBTQIA plus community. Is it the teen community? You need to have some sort of comfort for a lot of people and passion. However, if you don't, just by being in that room and understanding, just by listening and supporting, being a face amongst others to show that you're there. And I think what I've seen is that you've got to be uncomfortable, because when we do these women in community events, a lot of the time, Dan, you are the minority in the room because there's a lot of women in there. This is how women have felt for years. So it's not about putting the shoe on the other's foot, so to speak, but in a way, it's trying to understand it from someone else's point of view. You can't do that if you just read a book or you watch a film. You've got to really hear it. You've got to really see it. And that's
Mhm.
where I would suggest to people just giving a bit of your time away, dedicating. It's like fitness, isn't it? You could go the quick route or try to go the quick route of plastic surgery and pay a lot of money, but you really put the time in to be really the right way to be healthy and fit. It's the same with
Mhm.
DEI. And again, it is the top five things every CTO, CEO is looking at right now. And it's what shareholders are looking at. It's what employees are looking at. And it's looking, if you're in sales, customers want to say, are these the right organizations to work with? Do I really trust what they do? So two of my colleagues went to Dreaming in Color, which is a Salesforce event specifically for Black people. And a lot of the organizations are asking, tell me about the diversity stats. Can you show us that you really do believe in it? Or you are talking the talk? Now, the good thing is there are two Black people who work there. So clearly the statistic will be quite good already. And we're not the
Mhm.
biggest organization, even if we are large, so to speak, in our industry. So that really demonstrates that we are walking the walk.
Definitely. And I think, that's a good topic to hit on. If I'm a young professional and maybe I have experience already and I'm looking at really diving into seeing if the company I work for is the right one for me, or I'm searching for jobs, what's maybe a question or two that you'd recommend asking in an interview to try and investigate to see if a company is walking the walk, so to speak?
That is a brilliant question. There's several questions you can ask, and you've got to be very careful how you ask them. So I do love when people do challenge me because, firstly, you need to have questions for interviewers to show that you're actually interested and you want to hear their point of view. So, for instance, someone I hired about a year and a half ago came from an organization he'd been at for 8 years where he felt DEI was lacking. So he said to me, can you just tell me what you're doing around DEI? That was it. And I was like, okay, that's a great question, very open question. But then he would say, okay, but what does good look like to your organization? What are you actually really trying to achieve? And the other things as well is BRGs and ERGs is a really safe space for many people. So a great question is, do you have BRGs? And if so, what are they? Because sometimes you're like, well, that demographic is a certain focus in certain areas. So that's really crucial. I think the other element is a lot of startups sometimes are a bit like, well, we're a startup, we're new, we don't have enough people, but it starts at the very beginning. It starts at the very beginning. I was talking to a friend who's starting up a company and it's for men. And I'm like, one's this background, one's this. And I go, we still don't have any women. Now, it's not about trying to find a way to hit every single demographic, but you should have the intentions. So, what are you doing intentionally to hire the right people, to retain the right staff, and drive the right programs, to build the right community so that every single person around that room goes, I can join this organization. And
Mhm.
you can get very quick to a point where you grow substantially and it's all the same people, then it's going to be very hard to untrain or change that landscape.
Definitely. I was at a networking event a handful of months ago that was here in Austin, and it was all around diversity, equity, and inclusion and how to build that type of programming and community at your organization. And it just so happened that someone from my particular employer was actually the keynote speaker of it, and it was our head of DEI, a relatively young professional, but he had great experience all across HR. He'd worked for a number of different companies in different industries. He was also part of the LGBTQIA plus community as well. So he was honestly just someone with direct experience in a number of areas that align with ERGs. And he was talking about how the really impactful ERGs that are built from the ground up, built at the start, like you just said. And it really is not just building a community group on paper, it's developing programming and maybe even training so that you're fostering an environment that really believes in it. And so it was just super interesting. We hear about ERGs all the time, and most large organizations, especially those that are global, have those types of community programming and groups. But anyone listening, if you're considering a medium to small sized company, that would be easy to say, well, we don't have enough manpower to build it. That's not really a valid excuse because, Danny, like you just said, you got to have people that are passionate about it, that care about it, and are really willing to roll up their sleeves and make it happen instead of just talking about it.
You're on the money completely. I think the one thing you did touch on is your head of DEI came from that community. Absolutely has a much better affinity to understanding about being a minority and what has happened through life and through our experiences. So it's a much more powerful position than me, who is a white male who has probably not experienced that. Now, I'm technically Jewish and I went to a Jewish boarding school. So there were certain things that happened in my life that have taught me better. They've taught me well about prejudice and hate, But love is love, and that's all I can bring every day. And if I have that mindset of that vision of let's create pathways for everyone, let's change the world, and let's be the change we want to see, that's all we can do. I'm not trying to be anything more than support and put a spotlight on others, because I understand and recognize that us white guys, we've had it good for a few years. Even if I've had a tough upbringing, the generalized and the kind of common traders we haven't, we've had it easier than the rest.
Definitely. I want to pivot topics a little bit. You work in staffing. You're a highly decorated motivator. You're a speaker, panelist. You talk to people in that world all the time, especially in STEM. What are some key pieces to upskilling and maybe building their confidence as they start?
That's a great question. So I think just a few things, especially from a DEI perspective, getting into STEM, a lot of skills are transferable. I don't have an education background, okay? But I know how to hustle and work hard. You wouldn't be able to see it, but I was very good at sports when I was a kid. I was very competitive. If I look at my industry I'm in, it's a very competitive, resilience-based role. So I know that I've got that makeup. If I'm looking at STEM, whether it's getting into an engineering role, science, math, all the stuff that comes with STEM or tech, etc. But the one thing I find is it's soft and the hard skills. You've got to have both, okay? So the soft skills are more important now than they've ever been, especially in technology. You have a lot of people who are introverts, which is not a bad or good thing. And they are brilliant coders, programmers, engineers. We've seen ChatGPT, okay? And it is taking certain parts of those roles away. So you have to adapt. You've always got to be looking like you're learning. It's the three things I look for when I hire people is work hard, continue to learn, and show the right behaviors. Is for anyone who's looking for a job or looking to skill up is, are you working hard to get better? Are you looking to learn and develop? And you can learn and develop through many things like going to coding schools, getting mentors, allies, going to communities where you have the same types of people who can give you that support. There are communities everywhere. You've just got to go and find them, and you've got to give it the time to go out and do it. I just got a message from San Diego Tech Hub that I'm part of the board. They're doing an event for job seekers. So there's so many all the time. I'm doing a panel on Wednesday for Women in Tech in San Antonio. So if anyone says there's nothing out there, there is. You've got to go and find it. You've got to go work hard, continue to learn and develop. Remember every day why you're doing it. And I think that's where it becomes easier to learn. Forget about today. It's like running a marathon. Enjoy the journey because the goal will eventually come through. But I do think there's a lot of transferable skills. There's a lot of companies out there who can upskill. We do a program called Hire Me, which is to uplift and upskill people's confidence and tactics to get a job. And we do that because I know how to get a job. A lot of people don't. And they just need those tools and support. And a lot of underrepresented, underserved communities don't get that access. But the things that we're doing is to give people an opportunity that my mum may not have had, for example.
Definitely. And I think as we think about building confidence and going to networking events and things like that, it's important to have at least practiced talking about some of the things related to your story, some of the things that you and I have done just in this conversation. Can you talk about the importance of having a clear plan and how having that helps you be able to tell your story more effectively?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that, Dan. So it's like the 4 steps, I call them. So work backwards. So if you've got a goal, you want to get a job by X date, there's certain things you've got to work out, the kind of KPIs, like how many numbers of interviews, resume send outs, etc. But the first thing you start with is your personal brand. So if I go to LinkedIn, Dan, can I tell instantly what you do, who you are? Because on average, a recruiter will look for 8 seconds to see if you're the right candidate, and then they'll move on. The first thing I say to people is, do you have your brand? What is your brand? You should be able to then be able to tell your story around that brand. What do you stand for? So I'm a staffing specialist. This is my story. This is how I got into it. This is why I do what I do. The third part is probably the hardest for a lot of people, which is your network. A lot of people start with none. So you've got to go out there. And it's one of those fears, I'm approaching people. And there was a really good story I heard. I don't want to misquote or put any names in it, but I believe it was a president who felt that to build bridges with the enemy, he would ask them for advice. Because what you do when you ask someone for advice is you make them feel powerful. You make them feel like, I've got something to give you. You want something off me. So when I approach people in the market, I actually text one of my friends. I say, hey, I just saw one of your networks is hiring. If you love me, can you put in a good word? Now, I haven't read his text, and he might go, no way, you're awful. But your network is your net worth. But it does take time to build credibility, but you've got to go out there. So first step, build your personal brand. If you don't know who you are, it's going to be very hard to sell that and convince someone to hire you. That's when you build out your storytelling and your 2-3 minute elevator pitch. And I always say to people, think of it like a film trailer. Make them excited about all the great stuff and the tough stuff too. Show your resilience, show your bounce back ability. Third part is build your network. But the fourth part is what hones in from what I said at the very beginning: start with the plan and then work backwards. If you
Mhm.
do that and you do it over and over again, the more content you make, the more chances you create. You've got to go out there and hunt. You've got to go out there and farm. You can't do one without the other. It just does take time, but you are your own dream maker. It's in your hands. If you focus and apply that, you will be very successful.
A couple of pieces I love that you just said. You are your own dream maker. It's in your hands. I think it's easy for a lot of us to blame it on, oh, well, my parents didn't know anything, or I don't have any close friends that are working in the industry, so I haven't learned from them, or I'm in the wrong environment, so I'm not learning, I'm not growing. You do have to take ownership of your own choices so that you can continue to drive yourself forward. Another thing I really like that you started on it when answering that question is the value that you can put on other people helping you learn. One of the things
Absolutely.
that I did in college, and even like I have a master's degree, I was working full time and I still would play this card when I was in grad school. I would tell people, hey, I'm a student. I'm new to this. I don't know a ton about it, or I'm starting to learn a little bit more. Can you shed some light into XYZ topic? Or I'm at this networking event and I hear a lot of people talking about this technical skill that I don't have. Would you be willing to talk just for a minute about this topic? Because I'm trying to walk away today learning a little bit more. I think we're all driven a little bit by the ability to talk about ourselves or about things
Yes.
that we know. Because, like you said, when people are asking us for advice, it puts power in our own hands. You don't want to gaslight them, but if you can make people feel good because you're telling them they know more than you do and you want to learn from them, a lot of times they're going to give you even more than you asked for.
You're so on the money. And it's a sales technique as well. When in doubt, just send it out. When in doubt, put yourself out. Because the worst thing they can do is radio silence. The best thing they can do is say, yes, I'd love to chat. The worst thing is, no, I'm not ready. That's fine. But then who could you refer me to? So for me, when in doubt, send it out always. I think your advice is phenomenal, Dan, about what to do at these networking events. Bit of advice I'd give is if you see one person by themselves, go and connect with them because there may be as alone as you, or maybe you make them feel as great as you can. Secondly, message the keynotes or the people speaking at the event, asking them for 5 minutes. They will feel honored, they will feel special, and they'll always give you that time.
Definitely. When I was at career fairs as a campus recruiter, there were times when I had the microphone and I could give a 5-10 minute pitch about something. I wasn't necessarily the keynote speaker, but in some ways I was an expert when I had the microphone. And if I said something that resonated with somebody, maybe they didn't get a chance to come shake my hand or something, but they'd message me on LinkedIn. Hey, Dan, I saw you at this event. I really found this interesting about your company. Can you shed 5 minutes of your time to help me learn about XYZ? Number one, I love helping people. So of course I'm going to meet with those people. But yeah, like it does make me feel good. It makes me feel like what I had to say and the time that I spent to go to that event was valuable. And there are a number of reasons why I would love to do that. And I know that, like you just said, a keynote speaker or something, they're up there because they like to talk and help people learn. And so if
Yeah.
you do that out of your own time in a direct way, that is going to help you really shine brighter than other people that never reached out.
You're 100% right, man.
So, Danny, what's something that you feel like young professionals stress over that really they don't need to be stressed about?
There is a book by Conor McGregor's coach, and it's called Win or Learn. I say it to my team all the time: win or learn. It's like you celebrate the wins. You have to recognize and celebrate the behaviors. So, to all the people out there who are stepping into finding their first job, getting that fear, you can't control that fear. You can't control the unknown. But what you can control is the controllables, which is your work ethic, your effort, and your learn. So that's the first thing I say to everyone is celebrate the input. Celebrate, oh my God, I got my first resume out. I got my first interview. I got my first this. I got my first. Celebrate every little win because you'll eventually get there. That's the first thing I say is celebrate the wins all the time and find the people who will celebrate with you. The second part is every time you have a bad moment, you can blame others. It's very easy to blame others. Take extreme accountability. And what I mean by that is, what could I have done differently? What could I have learned? No matter what, I could blame everyone else. What could I have done? And what could I have learned from this? And if you don't, you're not learning, you're not developing. It's funny, Dan, when my teams are doing well, I'm actually more worried because I'm like, they're going to take their foot off the gas. They think they've made it. We were actually on a chat today with one of our boards, and we had one of these individuals who had a really good start and thought the job was easy. But I always say, listen, win or learn. So I think for anyone going through this path of finding their first job or finding themselves, just celebrate the good wins and celebrate the learns. The final thing I'd also say is every time you have a good moment and you feel good, write it down. And every time you have a bad moment, do the same thing. Each week, look at the trends. And what you'll find through the data is It's not 101 things you're getting upset with. It's not 101 things you're getting really happy with. It's usually two or three key themes, key trends, key initiatives that are happening that make you feel really good, and opposite. So that would be my kind of advice. And the final bit, honestly, I think I said it during this, was find your tribe, find those who celebrate with you. If you don't have it, go and find those communities, because we found each other down through one of my tribes. He's one of my best human beings in the world. He was there for me through a tough moment in my career. I actually hired him at one moment, then I left, but he was just always there for me. And I would always be there for him. And he may never know how much that meant to me, but I would never forget it. This is the point you were saying earlier: when you help others, you don't realize how much you really do help others. So find your tribe and find how you can help others too. Share your experiences, share your stories, because bad or good, they will help someone else learn from what you've experienced.
For sure. I love that. So many bits of gold out of that. I like to ask a fun question of all the guests. If you were to look back and your 20-year-old self, and that 20-year-old you could look into a crystal ball and see present day Danny, what's something that he would be happy about, either personally or professionally or both?
So he would not believe it. I had so many insecurities, so many concerns, so many worries. To be 40 today, to have an amazing wife, an incredible son, amazing parents. But it's not our fault a lot of the time where we grew up. It's not our fault what we were born into. But it is our fault if we do nothing about it. I've used all the experiences I've had to make me a better person, but I still beat myself up. I still feel the same pain as I did when I was a 20-year-old. It doesn't get any easier. You just learn a bit better. You stay a little bit more patient. And I'm just very lucky. I'm very fortunate where I am today. But my friends would always say, you work so hard for it. You're not fortunate. But a lot of people work hard for it and don't get those lucky breaks. So I feel very fortunate where I am today. That's why I got my first tattoo, was sky's the limit, because I believe if I can do it, anyone can. And also I love Biggie. So I thought, well, he's cool. Great quote, good tattoo, good story. But I do recognize that I work very hard because I care so much about the future it will bring to others. So that's why I continuously keep going. I know I love a quote, and I'm going to butcher this one, but Winston Churchill said, when you're running through hell, keep on running.
It's kind of like the no pain, no gain, or what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Danny, for anyone that's listening that wants to hear more about your story or continue to learn from you, what are some places or ways that they should stay connected with you?
Great question. Love that. Danny.Cohen@impellium.com. Message me anytime. LinkedIn, please follow me. I'm at my max connections, but please follow me. Please message me. I am on many communities. So if you want to be part of them, whether it's WICT, which is Women in Tech, you can be an ally, you can be a woman, or you can be any gender that you want to be. Please be part of those communities. The biggest way to get in touch with me is through LinkedIn, because I'm reading it all the time. And if it is business first, then I'll start with that first. Just reach out. And my email, as I said, is there for you to be able to connect with me. So that would be the best place to start.
Awesome. Well, Danny, I so much appreciate you being here and shedding so much light to your background and story, and sharing so much insight and expertise that can help young professionals growing their career. I just want to thank you once more and wish you well, and looking forward to connecting again very soon.
Thank you for having me on. It's been a pleasure.